A rabbit gremlin with spiky hair and a slightly unsettling grin helped create a business worth around £1.8 billion. Yes, you heard that right. Not a shiny piece of tech, not a revolutionary medicine. A small plastic figure that looks like it lost a fight with a crayon box. How on earth does something like that end up shaping global markets? Before you get comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. While you're at it, please like and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely enjoying these videos. Now then, how did a mischievous toy character, dreamed up by an illustrator, transform into a cultural and financial storm? What makes this story unusual is that it wasn't random. Labubu didn't just stumble into fame. The frenzy was carefully engineered with design choices, distribution tricks, and a business model that turned ordinary shoppers into unpaid marketers. It's less about luck and more about understanding human behavior and exploiting it with a smile. By the time most people outside Asia had even heard the name, queues were wrapping around city blocks, resale prices were outpacing wages, and Pop Mart, the company behind the rollout, was trading at valuations most startups can only dream of. This wasn't just fandom, it was a functioning economy with rules, rituals, and its own black market. Tonight we're going to pull apart the mystery of how Labubu went viral, not in the noisy one-week trend sense, but in a way that built lasting brand power. We'll explore the psychology that makes ugly cute impossible to ignore, the scarcity systems that turned shopping into theatre, and the resale loops that kept the fire burning. We'll also meet the creator, Kasing Lung, whose illustrations gave Labubu its soul, and see how Pop Mart built the commercial machine around it. Together, they proved that you don't need Hollywood budgets or Silicon Valley slogans to generate billions. Just a mischievous gremlin, a queue outside a shop, and a very disciplined calendar. By the end of tonight, you'll see exactly how a single character created a multi-billion-pound wave, and more importantly, what this teaches us about how virality really works in business. Spoiler, it's not magic, it's strategy dressed up as play, and if that sounds slightly cynical, well, welcome to modern consumer culture. Now that we've teased the question, let's meet Labubu properly and see how a character from an artist's sketchbook was positioned to take over shelves and social feeds alike. To understand how Labubu reached £1 billion valuation, we need to know who the key players are. First, there's the character itself, a strange but oddly appealing figure created by illustrator Kasing Lung. Then there's Pop Mart, the company that took Labubu from sketches and art shows into malls, convenience stores, and eventually the balance sheets of global investors. When people talk about something going viral, they usually mean it trended online for a week before disappearing. Labubu is different. Its virality didn't just create a spike in attention, it created a system of repeated demand. Launches, queues, resale markets, all feeding back into one another until the brand became self-sustaining. That's what makes this case so fascinating. What we'll be exploring tonight is not just a toy that sold well, but a strategy that blended art, psychology, scarcity, and technology into a business model. Each piece on its own looks simple enough, but when you put them together, you get a machine that reliably converts attention into revenue and fans into brand ambassadors. To keep it straightforward, we'll walk through the entire story in layers. We'll start with where the character came from, why it looked different from anything else on the shelf, and how that design played into people's instincts. From there, we'll break down Pop Mart's blind box system and how it turned shopping into an addictive ritual. Along the way, we'll examine the unboxing culture, the resale economy, and the collabs that pushed Labubu into everyday life. We'll see how demand was kept high without exhausting fans, and why the community built around Labubu became just as valuable as the toy itself. And finally, we'll zoom out to ask whether this is a bubble or a lasting brand. At its heart, the story raises a bigger question. How do ordinary products become movements? What shifts a collectible from being just another toy to becoming a social signal, a cultural event, and a financial engine? The answer is less glamorous than most people hope. It comes down to careful planning, operational discipline, and understanding what makes people tick. It's tempting to dismiss the whole thing as hype, but there's nothing accidental about a company worth £1.8 billion. Pop Mart's rise with Labubu is closer to a case study in modern consumer psychology than a quirky fad. It shows us how taste, scarcity, and status can be packaged into a product small enough to sit on your desk. So, just who is this peculiar figure? Where did it come from? And how did its creator make it feel both odd and instantly recognizable? That's where the story really begins. Labubu wasn't born out of a boardroom strategy session or a consumer focus group. It came from the sketchbook of an illustrator named Kasing Lung. Lung's work often featured characters with childlike proportions, eerie expressions, and a sense of mischievous energy. Labubu, with its big ears and sharp teeth, was never intended to be cute in the conventional sense. And yet, that became its strength. At first, Labubu was a figure known mainly in niche art toy circles. These communities valued originality, rarity, and the strange charm of characters that sat somewhere between endearing and unsettling. Labubu fit perfectly. It looked like something you'd find scribbled on the back of a notebook in a moment of dark humor, but refined into a form that could be held in your hand. The early audience was small but dedicated. Collectors in Hong Kong and mainland China began snapping up limited Labubu figures at exhibitions and small-scale events. The appetite was there, but it needed a system to grow. This is where Pop Mart entered the story. They weren't just looking for products, they were looking for characters with distinct identities that could anchor a whole ecosystem of collectibles. Pop Mart signed Labubu in 2016, and that changed everything. What had been an artist's cult creation suddenly had a distribution powerhouse behind it. The company saw in Labubu what many didn't at first glance: a character strange enough to be memorable, flexible enough to appear in endless variations, and quirky enough to inspire a fan community. Part of Labubu's appeal was its contrast with more polished mascots. Where Disney characters were smooth and symmetrical, Labubu looked deliberately odd. It was proof that imperfection could be a brand asset. In a world of overly polished icons, Labubu stood out precisely because it looked a little rough around the edges. Kasing Lung's influence never disappeared, though. Even as Pop Mart scaled production, his artistic sensibility remained embedded in the design. Fans could sense that Labubu hadn't been engineered by committee, but had a single creator behind it. That gave it authenticity, which is often the hardest thing to manufacture once scale enters the picture. The timing also helped. By the late 2010s, a younger generation of Chinese consumers were looking for ways to express individuality while still engaging with popular culture. Labubu offered exactly that: something playful, affordable, and distinctly different from mass-market toys. It sat neatly at the intersection of personal style and mainstream recognition. So while Labubu started as one artist's sketch, it quickly became a cornerstone of a business strategy. Its oddness became its uniqueness, and its uniqueness became its value. Without that original spark from Kasing Lung's pen, Pop Mart would have had no foundation to build on, and Labubu would still be a niche curiosity instead of a global collectible. If Labubu was the spark, Pop Mart's blind box system was the engine. At its core, a blind box is a sealed package containing one figure from a series, but the buyer doesn't know which one until it's opened. This simple trick turns a normal purchase into an event, blending anticipation, luck, and surprise into a repeatable experience. The psychology here is straightforward. Humans are wired to respond to variable rewards. The same principle behind lotteries and, less glamorously, fruit machines. Sometimes you pull a common figure, sometimes a rare chase piece worth many times the retail price. That unpredictability keeps people coming back, even when logic says one toy should be enough. From a business point of view, it's a dream. Blind boxes mean predictable revenue per unit, because the average cost and demand stays stable, but the chance of a rare pull drives repeat purchases. Instead of one customer buying one figure, you've got the same customer returning again and again in the hope of completing the set. Collecting instincts kick in hard. When a series has, say, 12 regular figures and one or two rarities, the maths means you'll almost certainly end up with duplicates before you finish. This isn't an accident. Duplicates fuel trading communities, social swaps, and even resale markets, which in turn create more buzz and attention for the brand. Packaging plays its role too. The design is consistent, colorful, and perfectly stackable, which makes shops look instantly full and appealing. But the sealed format is what really matters. It removes the option of cherry-picking from shelves, ensuring every unit has a chance of being bought. It's operationally efficient while doubling as marketing psychology. What makes Pop Mart's use of blind boxes so powerful is scale. Other industries have dabbled with mystery formats, from football sticker packs to Pokemon cards, but Pop Mart standardized it across multiple IPs and built entire retail experiences around the model. With Labubu, this system amplified its odd charm into a frenzy. It's worth pausing on the ethical edge. Blind boxes are essentially gambling light. Critics point out the similarities to loot boxes in video games, which have already raised regulatory concerns. Pop Mart's defense is that you always get a physical item of consistent value. Still, the addictive loop is undeniable. It works because it's engineered to work. And so, a mischievous character like Labubu found itself not just as art, but as the star player in a system designed to convert attention into revenue on repeat. Now that we've seen how the box works, the next question is why Labubu itself was the perfect face to put inside it. Labubu's appeal is strange at first glance. The character isn't traditionally attractive. Its features are exaggerated, uneven, and a bit unsettling. Yet somehow, this combination makes it irresistible. Designers call this ugly cute, a style that mixes awkwardness with charm. It stands out precisely because it doesn't look perfect, which is a powerful tool in a market oversaturated with flawless, forgettable mascots. Psychologically, the effect taps into attention bias. Our brains notice things that break patterns more than those that fit neatly. Labubu's sharp teeth, oversized eyes, and slightly menacing grin disrupt the expectations of what a cute toy should look like. Instead of blending in with a sea of rounded pastel characters, it demands a double take. That disruption is marketing, disguised as design. At the same time, ugly cute plays with familiarity. Features like big eyes and small bodies still trigger nurturing instincts, the same way we respond to baby animals. But the mismatched elements create a tension that makes the character memorable. It's the balance between comfort and discomfort. Enough softness to attract, enough oddness to stick in your head. This balance matters for visibility. On a crowded shelf, Labubu's silhouette is instantly recognizable. From several meters away, you can spot its spiky ears and mischievous outline. Move closer, and the small details reward the eye with quirks and variations. That two-layered recognition, clear from afar, interesting up close, is exactly what you want in a collectible. There's also a story element in its expression. Labubu always looks slightly guilty, as if it's been caught doing something mischievous. That narrative hook makes it easier for people to project personalities onto the figure. When customers start telling stories about a product without being prompted, it becomes more than merchandise. It becomes a character in their daily lives. The design also helps with endless variation. Because Labubu has such a distinct core identity, it can wear costumes, seasonal outfits, or themed accessories without losing recognizability. This gives Pop Mart and Kasing Lung a license to refresh the line continuously while keeping it consistent. It's a marketer's dream. One character, infinite expressions. Of course, not everyone gets it. Some people find Labubu creepy, unsettling, or just plain ugly. But that polarization actually fuels demand. In business, indifference is worse than dislike. A divisive design still sparks conversations, reactions, and curiosity. And in the end, the people who love it really love it, which matters far more than universal approval. So Labubu's odd charm isn't an accident. It's an example of design psychology being used deliberately to create memorability, variation, and attachment. With a face like that, it was only a matter of time before scarcity systems took hold and turned interest into obsession. And that's exactly where the story heads next. If Labubu's design caught attention, the way it was sold kept that attention burning. Pop Mart didn't rely on toys sitting patiently on shelves. Instead, they engineered scarcity into the shopping experience. Limited runs, scheduled drops, and controlled access meant that buying a Labubu figure wasn't just a transaction. It was an event that people planned their week around. The drop calendar became the heartbeat of the brand. New figures weren't simply released whenever stock was ready. They were timed carefully, often tied to seasons, festivals, or collaborations. By concentrating demand into specific moments, Pop Mart made each release feel like an occasion. Fans knew they had to be ready, or they risked missing out entirely. Lotteries were used to manage demand where queues became unmanageable. Rather than first come, first served chaos, customers entered for a chance to buy. It sounds like a small detail, but this system created a perception of fairness while keeping anticipation high. The randomness added drama without punishing loyal fans too heavily. It was part scarcity, part crowd management. Queues themselves became part of the theatre. Long lines outside stores created visual proof of demand. They told passers-by that something special was happening, even if they'd never heard of Labubu before. 100 people waiting in the rain for a small plastic toy sounds ridiculous, which, ironically, is why it draws even more curiosity. Behind the scenes, production runs were carefully controlled. Too much stock would kill the resale market and reduce excitement. Too little would frustrate fans and risk backlash. Pop Mart aimed to keep sell-through close to 100% while leaving just enough demand unmet to fuel the next queue. It was supply and demand turned into choreography. This approach also turned waiting into a community-building exercise. Fans chatted in line, shared snacks, and compared collections. Scarcity wasn't just about limiting access, it was about turning access into a social ritual. You weren't just buying a toy, you were joining a club. And once you're part of that community, you're less likely to step away. The entire system was designed to make queuing and waiting feel normal, even enjoyable. Scarcity became a feature, not a flaw. It signaled quality, created urgency, and gave fans a story to tell. I queued for hours, but I got one is far more powerful than I just bought one off the shelf. Scarcity, then, was more than a tactic. It was a brand strategy that worked hand in hand with design, psychology, and distribution. And with queues and lotteries creating rituals, the next natural step was to look at how those moments turned into digital stories, through the unboxing culture that would soon dominate social feeds. Once the queue ended and a customer finally had their blind box in hand, the real theatre began. Pop Mart designed the packaging not just to protect the toy, but to stage a miniature performance. The glossy box, the sealed foil packet inside, even the collectible card, every element was carefully planned to build suspense before the big reveal. Opening a blind box is a tiny drama. First the tear strip, then the crinkle of foil, then the reveal of what's inside. It lasts only seconds, but those seconds are perfect for short-form video. Platforms like TikTok and Douyin thrive on moments that combine anticipation, surprise, and reaction. Blind boxes deliver all three, neatly packaged. This ritual turned ordinary buyers into broadcasters. Collectors filmed their pulls, traders posted their duplicates, and even casual fans shared the big reveal for the fun of it. Each clip became unpaid marketing, spreading Labubu far beyond Pop Mart's own channels. A marketing department couldn't dream of producing this much fresh material every day. The social aspect amplified the effect. People weren't just showing what they got, they were comparing, reacting, and tagging friends. Hashtags and challenges grew naturally out of the experience. Suddenly, opening a toy became content people consumed, even if they never planned to buy one themselves. Curiosity alone pulled in millions of extra viewers. The element of rarity kept the loop alive. When someone hit a chase figure, the reaction felt like winning the lottery. Those clips traveled fastest, giving every viewer the same thought. Maybe I'll get lucky too. The psychology here is the same as watching someone else hit a jackpot, except you can copy them with a quick purchase. For Pop Mart, this was a masterstroke. The packaging created content opportunities, the rarity kept attention high, and the community distributed it all for free. The company saved on traditional advertising costs because fans did the job themselves, and they did it in a way that felt more authentic and entertaining than any polished campaign. It also created a new kind of customer journey. Buying wasn't the final step, it was the start of a cycle. Purchase, reveal, share, trade, repeat. Each action pushed fans deeper into the ecosystem. Some would even buy more boxes, purely for the joy of unboxing them on camera, regardless of whether they needed another figure. This unboxing ritual cemented Labubu's position as more than a product. It was a source of entertainment, a form of social interaction, and a reliable stream of content for a whole community. And as those moments spread online, they fed directly into the tipping points where Labubu stopped being a niche toy and started becoming a cultural frenzy. Every successful brand has a moment when it shifts from being a niche obsession to something mainstream. For Labubu, that tipping point came when queues outside stores started hitting headlines and resale prices began to soar beyond retail. What looked like a small toy craze suddenly became a spectacle, and nothing spreads curiosity faster than visible scarcity in public spaces. Early collectors already knew the thrill of chasing figures, but when photos of lines stretching down shopping malls began circulating online, it turned private hobby into public story. Media outlets love images of adults queuing for toys. It makes great headlines, equal parts entertaining and bewildering. Each article doubled as free advertising, signaling that Labubu was no longer just for insiders. At the same time, the resale market became impossible to ignore. Figures bought for £10 to £15 were flipping for 3 or 4 times that amount within hours of release. For some, this was validation of their collecting passion. For others, it was an invitation to join the queue simply for profit. Either way, attention compounded, drawing in new crowds with every drop. This is how network effects really take hold. The bigger the queue, the more others want to join it. The higher the resale price, the more people start treating the toy as an investment. Labubu stopped being just a collectible and became a story about opportunity. Whether that opportunity was fun, status, or quick cash depended on who you asked. Social media fueled this growth even more. Unboxing videos and resale success stories spread faster than any official campaign could. For every clip of a rare pull, there were thousands of viewers thinking, next time, that could be me. Virality here wasn't random. It was driven by a mix of visible demand, envy, and curiosity. Crucially, these tipping points weren't left to chance. Pop Mart understood that sellouts and resale spikes created legitimacy. Each time demand outstripped supply, it confirmed to both fans and skeptics that the brand was hot. That proof of heat gave them confidence to expand further, roll out more drops, and attract new retail partners. Of course, this stage also attracted criticism. Headlines about toy mania implied irrational behavior, and some questioned whether grown adults camping for collectibles had lost the plot. Yet even backlash added fuel. Controversy kept Labubu in the news cycle, and the more people heard about it, the more they wanted to see what the fuss was about. By the time these tipping points had stacked on top of each other, Labubu wasn't just an odd little character. It was a frenzy that mixed art, community, and speculation into a single product cycle. And once that fire was lit, collaborations became the next natural move to push Labubu beyond the toy shelf and into everyday culture. When a brand tips into frenzy, the next step is often collaboration. Labubu didn't stay confined to the toy aisle. Pop Mart and Kasing Lung used partnerships to expand visibility in everyday life. These collaborations weren't random. They followed a ladder, first with small retail promos, then with food chains, then with fashion capsules, and finally with lifestyle pop-ups. The food and beverage tie-ins came first. Coffee shops, bubble tea chains, and convenience stores offered limited edition Labubu merchandise with drinks or snacks. This worked because it lowered the barrier to entry. Even people who'd never queued for a toy could get involved for the price of a latte. A daily habit suddenly became part of the brand story. Convenience stores played a similar role. Imagine grabbing a bottle of water and getting a Labubu sticker or collectible with it. The effect was scale. Instead of waiting in line for hours, casual fans could join the movement through simple, low-cost purchases. For the brand, it was free distribution of identity across millions of touchpoints. Fashion was the next logical step. Capsule collections of hoodies, t-shirts, and bags gave fans a way to wear the character, not just display it. Importantly, these weren't full-scale fashion lines. They were limited runs designed for quick sellouts. The key rule: keep the silhouette and mischievous face intact, but let colorways and accessories vary with the partner's style. These collabs carried two benefits. They created novelty without diluting the brand, and they kept Labubu in circulation without exhausting toy collectors. By keeping the core design consistent, even casual collabs reinforced identity rather than confusing it. Fans recognized Labubu instantly, whether it was on a shelf, a coffee cup, or a hoodie. Operationally, the partnerships were smartly chosen. Food collabs could be produced quickly and distributed widely. Fashion capsules were low in volume but high in visibility. Pop-ups in shopping centers created experiences rather than just products. Each step delivered reach and awareness without putting pressure on factories or creating logistical nightmares. What ties these moves together is accessibility. Not everyone wants to spend hours chasing a rare blind box, but most people will happily grab a branded drink or hoodie. Collaborations brought Labubu into people's daily lives in small, manageable doses, which helped convert bystanders into fans. The brand scaled by being everywhere without feeling overexposed. So collaborations weren't a side hustle. They were a calculated strategy to expand the audience while keeping the core fan base satisfied. With food, fashion, and convenience partnerships in place, the brand created touchpoints across every lifestyle category. And once those touchpoints were established, the resale economy would take them to an entirely new level of intensity. One of the clearest signs that Labubu had reached frenzy status was the resale market. Within hours of a release, figures bought for around £10 to £15 could be listed online for 3 or 4 times that amount. For rarer chase editions, the multiplier was even higher. Suddenly, collectors weren't just hobbyists. They were participating in a functioning marketplace. This resale economy wasn't simply a side effect. It acted as a live indicator of demand. When a new design hit secondary platforms and prices spiked, Pop Mart could see instantly how much heat it carried. In traditional retail, sales reports might take weeks to analyze. With Labubu, the resale spread gave feedback almost in real time. Flippers played a role too. These were buyers less interested in the art and more in the profit. Some queued with spreadsheets, tracking which designs historically sold for the most. Their presence annoyed fans, but from a business perspective, they created liquidity in the market. They helped show what people were really willing to pay. Collectors, on the other hand, added stickiness. They weren't in it for the quick cash, but for completing sets, displaying them, or trading with others. This mix of speculators and genuine fans is what made the resale ecosystem so robust. It ensured both constant movement of products and long-term cultural value. For Pop Mart, watching these dynamics was free market research. A figure selling out instantly at retail was good news. A figure selling for triple its price on resale platforms was even better. It proved not just demand, but desirability. The data could then be used to size future drops, adjust runs, or forecast which collaborations might resonate. There is, of course, a risk of over-reliance on resale markets. If a brand leans too heavily into scarcity and secondary pricing, it risks alienating genuine fans who just want to collect. The trick is balance, allowing enough heat to make resale profitable, but not so much that it feels like ordinary buyers never stand a chance. It's also worth noting that resale attention can legitimize a brand in the eyes of outsiders. Someone who wouldn't normally notice a toy may pay attention when they see it treated like an asset. It shifts perception from novelty to cultural commodity. Even critics who rolled their eyes had to admit that the numbers were hard to ignore. So while some fans grumbled about profiteers, the resale economy was central to Labubu's rise. It created constant conversation, visible proof of demand, and data that informed the next wave of decisions. And where resale thrives, community naturally follows, bringing us to the flywheel effect that kept fans engaged and loyal. For a brand like Labubu, the product itself is only half the story. The other half is the community that formed around it. Collectors didn't just buy figures and leave them on a shelf. They organized meetups, trading groups, and online forums. These spaces became the backbone of the movement, turning individual purchases into a shared experience that kept people coming back. Trading was often the starting point. Because blind boxes produced duplicates, fans naturally began swapping figures to complete sets. What could have been an annoyance instead became a social opportunity. Pop Mart leaned into this behavior, encouraging trade fairs and community events. Suddenly, the act of buying one toy could introduce you to dozens of new people. Digital tools reinforced this flywheel. Official apps provided release calendars, product updates, and even digital checklists to track collections. Fans could tick off what they owned, share wish lists, and compare progress with others. It made collecting feel like a game, with goals, achievements, and visible progress. For some, this was as satisfying as the toys themselves. Newsletters and official announcements also played an important role. By controlling how information was shared, Pop Mart reduced the risk of leaks and kept trust high. Fans felt like insiders when they got updates directly from the source. The sense of belonging increased loyalty, and even small perks like early access lotteries became powerful retention tools. Fear of missing out was another key ingredient. Communities thrive on rituals, and Labubu fans knew that missing a drop meant missing not just a product, but a conversation. The online chatter around launches created pressure to stay engaged. Collectors didn't want to fall behind on sets, but they also didn't want to be left out socially. The strength of this flywheel is that it sustains itself. Fans generate content. Content attracts new fans fuel resale markets, and resale markets generate more conversation. Pop Mart doesn't have to push every cycle manually. It just provides the conditions for the loop to keep spinning. That's what makes it so efficient. Of course, not all parts of the community are purely cheerful. Any group involving queues, lotteries, and resale will include arguments, complaints, and the occasional drama. But even that noise serves a function. It shows passion, and passion is far more valuable than polite indifference. No one builds a billion-pound brand on silence. The result was a living, breathing ecosystem where every figure pulled added fuel to the fire. Collectors weren't just consumers, they were participants in a cultural game. And once the community was spinning at full speed, the challenge became scaling operations to keep pace without compromising quality or trust. Success brings its own problems. Once Labubu became a frenzy, the pressure shifted from generating demand to keeping up with it. Pop Mart's challenge wasn't how to sell toys, they were already selling out, but how to produce, distribute, and manage that growth without cracks appearing in the system. Scaling operations quietly became as important as the character itself. On the production side, factories had to handle sudden spikes in volume. One strategy was modular molds. Instead of designing from scratch each time, small tweaks like a new colorway or accessory could refresh the line without overloading production capacity. This made it possible to offer variety while keeping costs and timelines predictable. Paint and finishing quality also became critical. Fans may accept long queues, but they won't tolerate sloppy craftsmanship. Consistent paintwork, tight tolerances, and neat packaging were all part of protecting trust. A figure with misaligned eyes might seem trivial, but when collectors are trading and displaying items, tiny defects can feel like broken promises. Retail operations had their own strain. Long queues and crowded drops had to be managed with systems like lottery apps and ticketing to avoid chaos. Shops introduced clearer rules, time slots, and digital confirmations. It wasn't glamorous, but these steps turned potentially negative experiences into something fans felt was at least fair, if not always painless. Logistics played a quieter role, but an equally vital one. Stock had to arrive at the right locations, in the right quantities, without overloading warehouses. Staggered production runs and phased shipping schedules reduced the risk of bottlenecks. A single delay could have meant an empty store on release day, and nothing kills hype faster than shelves with no product. The balancing act was constant. Too much stock and the illusion of scarcity would collapse. Too little stock and customers would give up entirely. Pop Mart aimed to keep sell-through rates near perfect while leaving just enough unmet demand to fuel queues, discussions, and resale markets. It was inventory management as theatre, with real financial stakes. Behind the excitement, these operational systems are what allowed Labubu to move from niche art toy to billion-pound brand. Without steady quality, fair drops, and reliable logistics, the hype would have eaten itself alive. Instead, operations quietly supported the frenzy, ensuring it could scale across markets and sustain momentum. Of course, chaos might suit Labubu's mischievous personality, but on the factory floor or in a shipping center, chaos is a liability. Pop Mart's discipline in operations was the hidden scaffolding that allowed the craze to expand without collapsing under its own weight. Next came the challenge of handling narratives in the media and responding to the inevitable controversies. One of the biggest levers Labubu's creators pulled was the idea of the limited edition. These weren't just toys churned out by the million, they were presented as rare objects made in carefully controlled quantities. The phrase limited edition has a strange power. It makes something ordinary feel precious, even if it's essentially the same plastic mold with a different color. The psychology is straightforward. When people believe something is scarce, they want it more. Limited editions create urgency, driving collectors to buy immediately instead of waiting. They also create status. Owning one of a few hundred pieces feels different to owning one of millions. It gives the owner bragging rights, and in consumer culture, bragging rights can be priceless. This wasn't just marketing fluff. Limited runs genuinely did sell out in minutes. Collectors would queue outside shops, set alarms for midnight online drops, and crash websites in their attempts to get hold of the latest release. Each sold-out edition made the next one seem even more desirable. Scarcity and demand fueled each other in a perfect loop. The visual design of limited editions also added to their appeal. A gold finish here, a transparent resin there, or a special collaboration with a fashion brand. Small tweaks created huge waves of demand. To outsiders, it might look like nonsense. But for collectors, those little differences were the whole point. It was about uniqueness. Secondary markets amplified the effect. Limited editions would often resell at multiples of their retail price within hours. This didn't just reward the lucky buyers, it trained everyone else to pay attention. Missing a drop wasn't just disappointing, it meant missing out on potential profit. Suddenly, limited editions were both a hobby and a financial opportunity. Of course, the business model carried risk. Flooding the market with too many special editions could have diluted their meaning, but the team behind Labubu carefully spaced them out, making each feel like an event. The anticipation was as important as the object itself. People weren't just buying toys, they were buying into a series of moments. Limited editions also deepened the sense of community. Collectors would compare notes, trade, and even form entire networks around chasing specific figures. The scarcity created conversation, and conversation sustained the culture. In that way, limited editions weren't just products, they were tools for engagement. So while most companies rely on mass production, Labubu flipped the script. By leaning into the economics of scarcity and exclusivity, they made fewer products but created more demand. The limited edition wasn't just a sales tactic, it was the heartbeat of the brand's strategy. And it kept collectors coming back again and again. Once Labubu had conquered domestic markets, the next logical step was international expansion. Pop Mart understood that exporting a craze isn't as simple as shipping boxes overseas. Every new market has its own culture, retail infrastructure, and collector habits. Success abroad meant finding ways to localize the experience while keeping the character's identity consistent. The first step was choosing markets with the highest chance of traction. Countries in East and Southeast Asia were natural starting points because the culture of cute collectibles was already strong. Japan, South Korea, and Singapore had built-in audiences familiar with gacha machines, blind boxes, and character-driven brands. This meant less explaining and more immediate adoption. Localization required subtle adjustments. Instruction cards, packaging, and in-store signage were translated into local languages, and holiday-themed releases were tweaked to align with local festivals. In China, for example, Lunar New Year editions became popular, while in Japan, seasonal motifs linked to cherry blossoms or summer festivals helped Labubu feel native without losing its mischievous charm. Distribution strategies also varied by market. In some places, flagship stores made sense to establish presence and prestige. In others, vending machines or pop-up kiosks proved more effective, allowing for lower overheads while still capturing attention. Online sales channels were crucial too, especially in regions where digital shopping was more common than physical store visits. One of the main risks of going global is diluting the brand. If a character changes too much to fit local tastes, it risks losing its recognizability. Pop Mart managed this by holding the line on Labubu's core design. The spiky ears, mischievous grin, and expressive eyes stayed untouched. The variation was allowed in costumes, accessories, and seasonal themes, not in the essence of the character. This consistency meant that collectors in different countries could recognize each other's figures, even if the colorway or outfit differed. It preserved Labubu's identity as a global brand, while still allowing each region to feel they had something unique. That balance between uniformity and localization is one of the hardest things for international consumer brands to achieve. Of course, there were challenges. Western markets were less familiar with blind box culture, and some regulators raised eyebrows at the lottery-like mechanics. Education and transparency became more important there, alongside collaborations with more familiar consumer brands to ease the transition. Expansion was slower, but still possible with careful positioning. Going global was not just about finding more customers. It was about stress testing whether Labubu could survive outside its home environment. By maintaining the same mischievous soul while flexing around local habits, the brand proved it wasn't just a domestic craze. It was a business system with international potential, and with that global foundation, it was time to examine the numbers behind the toy, the unit economics that turned plastic into profit. Scarcity is one of the oldest tricks in business, and Labubu's makers used it with ruthless efficiency. They didn't just sell toys, they created moments of controlled panic. Only a handful of pieces would hit the shelves at once, and when they did, they disappeared almost instantly. The lesson was simple: if you wanted one, you couldn't wait around. This wasn't an accident. Limiting supply is a psychological tactic as much as a logistical one. People value things more when they think they might miss out. Economists call it the scarcity principle. Teenagers call it sold out in 2 minutes again. Either way, the brand knew exactly how to create a frenzy by rationing access. The clever part is that scarcity doesn't just drive urgency, it drives storytelling. Every frustrated collector venting online added to the hype. Every queue outside a shop was free advertising. Even those who had no intention of ever buying one started to pay attention, because it's human nature to wonder what's worth queuing for. Of course, there's a risk. Push scarcity too far, and you end up annoying people rather than exciting them. Plenty of brands have tried this and ended up with angry customers swearing off their products altogether. The difference with Labubu is that their characters were seen as art pieces as much as toys, meaning frustration could be reinterpreted as passion. They also knew how to mix scarcity with unpredictability. The blind box system meant you never quite knew which character you'd get. That turned every purchase into a gamble. Collectors weren't just racing against the crowd, they were racing against probability. If you've ever tried to complete a set of stickers and ended up with 30 duplicates, you'll know the feeling. This model turned buying into a game, and games are addictive. Suddenly, it wasn't just about owning a figure, it was about beating the odds, swapping with friends, and hunting down the rarest pieces. Scarcity, combined with chance, made the brand far more engaging than simply selling toys off a shelf. And once secondary markets got involved, scarcity worked overtime. Figures that retailed for a few pounds suddenly fetched hundreds online. Scarcity creates not only urgency, but also prestige. A sense that owning one puts you in an elite group. It's a neat way of turning ordinary plastic into social currency. So while most companies worry about not producing enough stock, Labubu's team made scarcity their business model. They didn't chase mass production or wide availability. Instead, they created a world where being hard to get was the whole point. A risky move, but one that turned limited supply into unlimited attention. Labubu's financial success wasn't only about selling lots of figures. It was about structuring prices in a way that created stability at the bottom and excitement at the top. Pop Mart achieved this by building a pricing ladder, standard figures for everyone, and rarer grails for those willing to pay more. This mix balanced accessibility with prestige, which is harder than it looks. At the entry point, regular blind box figures had a set retail price, usually affordable enough for teens and young adults. The consistency was crucial. Fans could budget for drops without fear of sudden hikes. Price stability at the base level protected the brand from accusations of greed and kept new buyers from feeling excluded before they even started. Above that, exclusives and collaborations offered subtle upgrades. These might cost slightly more or require specific purchase conditions, like buying in-store at a flagship location. They weren't dramatically more expensive, but the effort required to obtain them increased their perceived value. The clever part was that the price signal wasn't just monetary, it was also tied to effort. Then came the true grails. These were rare editions with tiny production runs or unique designs. Their rarity alone created higher resale value. Pop Mart never needed to inflate retail prices for these pieces because the secondary market did the heavy lifting. By keeping official pricing level, the company looked fair while allowing desirability to express itself elsewhere. Versioning was a critical tool in maintaining this balance. Instead of redesigning the mold for each new release, small tweaks, a change of outfit, a themed accessory, or a seasonal colorway refreshed the figure without adding huge costs. This allowed continuous novelty while keeping margins healthy. Fans got the thrill of variety, but operations stayed efficient. From a behavioral perspective, this structure played directly into collector instincts. Commons offered the satisfaction of steady progress. Exclusives created small victories. Grails delivered the dream of finding something truly rare. Each layer had its role, and together they created a system where fans felt rewarded no matter where they landed on the ladder. Humor lies in the simplicity of it all. Add a tiny hat or a new shade of green, and suddenly cues double in length. It sounds absurd, but that's exactly the point. When the character identity is strong enough, the smallest change feels meaningful. Pop Mart understood that novelty doesn't need to be radical to be effective. This pricing and versioning strategy protected margins, managed customer expectations, and fueled the resale market without undermining the brand. With a stable ladder in place, the next challenge was figuring out where the money actually changed hands, in stores, online, or even vending machines that never needed a day off. For Labubu, the question wasn't whether fans wanted the product, it was where they would get it. Pop Mart didn't rely on a single channel. Instead, it built a portfolio of touchpoints that worked together: flagship stores for theatre, vending machines for scale, and online platforms for reach. Each had its role, and together they maximized both visibility and sales. Flagship stores became cultural landmarks. They weren't just retail spaces, they were stages for the brand. With giant displays, themed decor, and carefully managed queues, these stores turned shopping into an experience. Fans took photos, shared their visits online, and treated the stores almost like tourist attractions. For Pop Mart, it meant brand loyalty as well as direct revenue. Vending machines were the opposite: quick, efficient, and low cost. Installed in high-traffic areas like shopping centers and transport hubs, they made impulse purchases easy. Customers could try their luck with a blind box during a commute or shopping trip. The machines didn't need staff or elaborate setups, which meant Pop Mart could scale presence rapidly without huge overheads. Online sales added fairness to the mix. Fans who couldn't travel to stores or wait in queues had a chance to buy directly from official websites or apps. Online drops were often run through lottery systems or timed releases to manage demand. This reduced frustration and made the brand feel more inclusive, even when products sold out quickly. The key was coordination. Pop Mart staggered releases across channels so they didn't cannibalize one another. A figure might debut in a flagship store before appearing online, or vending machines might get exclusive colorways not available elsewhere. This kept collectors engaged across all channels rather than sticking to just one. Measuring success wasn't just about sales numbers. Pop Mart looked at metrics like queue-to-purchase ratios in stores, sell-through speed in vending machines, and repeat purchase rates online. These gave insight into customer behavior, allowing the company to adjust distribution strategies in near real time. Each channel doubled as a revenue stream and a data source. Humor plays its part here too. Vending machines never call in sick, but they also don't offer the same Instagram-worthy experience as a flagship store. Both had their place. The brilliance was in recognizing that Labubu didn't need one perfect channel. It needed many, each tailored to different kinds of fans. With this multi-channel ecosystem in place, Pop Mart wasn't just selling toys, it was building a machine that converted attention into purchases across every environment. And with sales flowing steadily, the next priority was how to forecast demand accurately, ensuring every drop felt hot without crossing into chaos. Once demand for Labubu hit fever pitch, the challenge wasn't whether fans would turn up, it was how many and where. Guessing wrong meant either empty shelves or frustrated customers. Pop Mart avoided this by turning demand forecasting into a science. Data, not gut instinct, drove decisions on production runs, allocation, and timing of releases. The inputs were varied. Wish lists on official apps gave a direct sense of which designs fans were eyeing. Social media activity provided another signal, from hashtag volume to comment counts under teaser posts. Even the number of fan-made unboxing videos for older collections helped predict interest in the next drop. Every action was treated as a data point. Pre-launch indicators became crucial. If a teaser image was saved or shared at higher than average rates, that was a red flag to expect heavier demand. Similarly, waitlist signups or pre-registration data allowed the company to model likely sell-through speeds. Instead of hoping for queues, Pop Mart could anticipate them with a fair degree of accuracy. The resale market acted as a second layer of feedback. If older figures were climbing in price ahead of a new launch, that suggested pent-up demand for similar designs. Watching how fast listings appeared and how quickly they sold gave a clearer picture of the market's appetite than any traditional survey ever could. All of this data flowed back into allocation decisions. Popular stores were given more stock, but not so much that scarcity disappeared. Slower stores received less, but still enough to keep fans engaged. Online drops could be scaled based on interest levels, with reserve units held back for fairness restocks. It was maths meeting psychology. Communication was part of the system too. Countdown timers, teasers, and almost sold-out nudges trained customers to expect limited supply without the company ever needing to exaggerate. By carefully shaping perception, Pop Mart kept the cycle of anticipation alive while avoiding the reputational risk of overpromising. The process wasn't glamorous. Forecasting meant poring over spreadsheets and dashboards, balancing historical sales against fresh signals. For some teams, it probably felt like a never-ending homework assignment. But the payoff was enormous. Drops looked spontaneous and exciting to fans, but behind the curtain, they were meticulously calibrated. If your spreadsheet has more tabs than your browser, you're probably doing it right. Pop Mart's ability to predict the queue meant smoother drops, happier fans, and higher efficiency in operations. With data driving demand management, the next concern was protecting the brand from a growing threat: counterfeiters and copycats looking to cash in on Labubu's success. When a product becomes hot, copycats follow quickly. Labubu was no exception. Counterfeit figures appeared online within months of the craze taking off, often at cheaper prices, but with noticeably worse quality. For Pop Mart and Kasing Lung, protecting intellectual property wasn't just about paperwork, it was about safeguarding trust in the brand before fakes could poison the well. The first line of defense was legal. Trademarks covered the Labubu name and logo, while design rights and copyright agreements secured the distinctive silhouette and visual identity. These registrations gave Pop Mart the tools to pursue counterfeiters in court, or at least pressure platforms to take down listings. Without this foundation, enforcement would have been nearly impossible. But paperwork alone doesn't stop counterfeits. Pop Mart added technical measures. Figures were designed with tiny mold details that were difficult for bootleg factories to copy perfectly. Packaging included QR codes or NFC tags that customers could scan to verify authenticity. These small touches reassured buyers while making life harder for counterfeiters. Community played a role too. Collectors were educated on how to spot fake figures, from paint inconsistencies to incorrect packaging. Pop Mart encouraged fans to report suspicious listings, rewarding loyalty by making them part of the policing effort. Instead of scolding customers for buying fakes, the company framed education as a shared mission. The resale market made this even more important. When buyers pay triple or quadruple retail prices, they expect certainty. A counterfeit slipping into the secondary market could undermine confidence not just in one sale, but in the entire ecosystem. Protecting authenticity was, in many ways, protecting the resale value that fueled the frenzy in the first place. The financial stakes were clear. Every fake sold not only represented lost revenue, but also the risk of damaging reputation. If a collector's first experience of Labubu came through a poorly made counterfeit, they were unlikely to return for the real thing. In consumer psychology, disappointment lingers longer than curiosity. There's a dry irony here. Counterfeits are, in a way, compliments with legal fees. They prove a product is desirable enough to copy. But compliments don't build billion-pound businesses. Enforcement and authenticity checks do. Pop Mart couldn't eliminate fakes completely, but by minimizing their spread, they kept consumer trust strong. Protecting Labubu wasn't just about legal battles or tech tags. It was about preserving the aura of the character and the integrity of the community. With the moat defended, the next question became how to keep the creator, Kasing Lung, at the heart of the brand while operations scaled globally. For all the marketing tactics and clever scarcity tricks, the real engine of Labubu's growth was community. People didn't just buy these figures and leave them on a shelf. They shared them, swapped them, and built entire networks around them. It's the same principle that keeps football clubs alive or makes people queue for trainers at 5 a.m. The feeling of belonging. Community is what turns a passing trend into a culture. With Labubu, fans organized swap meets, Facebook groups, Discord channels, and even in-person gatherings. Suddenly, buying a toy wasn't a solitary act. It was an entry ticket into a conversation. It gave strangers something to connect over, whether they were trading duplicates or showing off a rare pull. The brand didn't have to pay for this energy. They just had to allow it to flourish. In fact, most of the best marketing Labubu ever had didn't come from adverts or press releases. It came from people sharing photos of their collections online. The pride of ownership became content in itself, and community kept it circulating. What makes community so valuable in business terms is that it's self-sustaining. The more people who join, the more valuable the group becomes. Collectors feed off each other's enthusiasm, new members get pulled in, and before long, the group develops its own identity. It's basically network effects, but with toys and an alarming number of Instagram hashtags. The real genius was how Labubu blurred the line between consumer and participant. Owners weren't just passive buyers, they were collaborators in the brand's story. Each display photo, each fan customization, each swap event added another layer to the narrative. In a sense, the fans did the work of expanding the universe for free. And that feeling of belonging creates resilience. Communities don't vanish the second a new trend comes along. They adapt, they evolve, and they hold on. Even when the hype dips, the friendships and social structures built around Labubu keep people invested. It's hard to walk away from a hobby when half your mates are in it with you. The commercial benefit of community is loyalty. A random buyer might purchase once, but a community member sticks around, brings in friends, and defends the brand when it's criticized. Community essentially turns customers into unpaid marketers and unpaid security guards. Not a bad return on investment. So while Labubu could have been just another toy craze, it became something bigger because people felt part of it. Scarcity drew them in, chance kept them hooked, but community is what held them together. And in business, that sense of belonging might be the most valuable commodity of all. Labubu's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. Collectible crazes have been around for decades, and each one leaves lessons. The 1990s Beanie Baby bubble is the most famous example. People stockpiled soft toys as investments, convinced values would rise forever. When supply ballooned and demand cooled, prices collapsed. The lesson: artificial scarcity without discipline eventually breaks consumer trust. Funko is a more recent comparison. The brand scaled aggressively with licenses from every possible franchise. That breadth drove growth, but it also created fatigue. Collectors started feeling overwhelmed by endless releases. Pop Mart's approach with Labubu was more selective. Instead of trying to own every license, they focused on depth within a few strong characters. Less was more. Closer to home is Molly, another character that played a central role in Pop Mart's rise. Molly's wide-eyed stare and distinctive face built the blueprint for character-driven blind boxes. The company learnt how to design drops, manage queues, and fuel resale through Molly. Labubu took the playbook further by leaning into ugly cute, which felt fresher and less polished. These comparisons highlight different risks. Beanie Babies show the danger of inflating supply to chase short-term profit. Funko illustrates how over-licensing can dilute identity. Molly demonstrates the importance of iterating on proven models while still offering something distinct. Labubu worked because it took the right lessons from each case, while avoiding the biggest mistakes. There's also a cultural layer. Beanie Babies were seen as speculative toys, not lifestyle brands. Funko Pops became mass-produced icons, but often lacked emotional depth. Molly and Labubu, by contrast, emerged from an artist-led tradition. That sense of origin gave them credibility. Fans weren't just buying toys, they felt connected to a creator's vision. The role of resale also differed. Beanie Babies collapsed partly because resale values couldn't sustain themselves once supply exceeded demand. Funko saw resale markets flatten as oversaturation set in. Labubu has so far maintained healthier resale signals by limiting production, versioning smartly, and ensuring each drop still feels like an event rather than routine stock. The key difference across all these cases is discipline. Pop Mart didn't pretend Labubu was infinitely scalable. They resisted the temptation to flood shelves or overissue licenses. They let scarcity, community, and design drive the brand, rather than chasing every possible sale. That discipline is what separated Labubu from the graveyard of forgotten crazes. When you line these examples up, the picture is clear. Virality without a system is fragile. Virality with a repeatable model is durable. Labubu may share DNA with Beanie Babies, Funko, and Molly, but its success came from learning where they stumbled. From there, it's easier to see why adults everywhere are happy to collect something that looks like a mischievous gremlin. One of the most striking parts of Labubu's rise is that much of its core audience isn't children at all. It's adults. Grown men and women queuing for hours, trading duplicates, and proudly displaying shelves of plastic figures might sound odd to outsiders, but there are clear cultural reasons why this works. Understanding those reasons helps explain the billion-pound value. First, collecting offers structure. In a world where everything feels digital and fleeting, a physical collection gives tangible progress. Completing a set feels like achieving a goal. It's a controlled challenge, unlike the messy unpredictability of work or relationships. For many adults, chasing the next figure is simpler and far more rewarding than chasing an email inbox. Nostalgia is another factor. Toys remind people of childhood, but these toys are updated for adult tastes. They're designed with an edge, not too cute, not too childish, but just strange enough to feel sophisticated. Labubu's mischievous grin separates it from cartoon mascots, making it socially acceptable for adults to collect without feeling like they've regressed to the playground. There's also identity. In the same way, some people collect trainers or watches, others collect art toys. Displaying Labubu isn't just about liking the character. It signals taste, culture, and membership in a particular community. A shelf full of figures says something about who you are and what you value, even if it confuses your parents. Community plays into this too. Adult collectors aren't just buying objects, they're buying belonging. Trade groups, meetups, and online forums create social worlds around the toys. For some, the friendships and rituals matter more than the plastic itself. Collecting becomes a hobby that anchors their social life, not just a financial transaction. Scarcity adds excitement. Adults may not queue for every product, but when something feels exclusive, it taps into the same psychology as limited edition trainers or luxury handbags. The fear of missing out turns a simple toy drop into an event. The fact that others are competing for the same prize only sharpens the desire. And finally, collecting offers small, affordable luxuries. Compared to watches, jewelry, or cars, a 10 to 15 pound figure feels like a manageable indulgence. For younger adults, it's a way to engage with luxury culture without breaking the bank. For older adults, it's a way to keep a playful spark alive without feeling irresponsible. So the cultural meaning of Labubu is bigger than plastic. It taps into nostalgia, identity, community, and affordability all at once. Adults aren't buying toys to escape responsibility. They're buying them because they offer a manageable, rewarding form of joy. With this cultural foundation in place, it's easier to see how Labubu fits into the broader history of collectible markets. One of the strangest outcomes of Labubu's rise is how quickly some collectors started treating the figures less like toys and more like financial instruments. Secondary market prices weren't just a fun curiosity, they became a signal of value in the same way shares or sneakers are tracked. For some, Labubu stopped being plastic and started being an alternative investment. The logic isn't new. Sneakers, watches, and trading cards have long been seen as alternative assets. They're items with cultural weight that can be bought, held, and resold for profit. Labubu fitted into that same category. A figure bought for £12 at retail could be flipped for £50 or more online. Multiplied across a set, it began to look like a portfolio. Platforms helped formalize this. Resale sites listed prices, tracked sales histories, and gave graphs showing trends. Collectors could check whether their Labubu was up or down, like they were following the FTSE 100. This data-driven view of toys encouraged speculative behavior, drawing in buyers who weren't fans, but investors sniffing opportunity. Of course, with speculation comes risk. Unlike traditional assets, toys don't pay dividends. Their value rests entirely on community demand and cultural relevance. If hype cools, resale prices fall fast. Beanie Babies proved that even the most hyped collectible can collapse when belief disappears. The difference with Labubu was Pop Mart's discipline in supply control. The idea of toys as assets also reveals a generational shift. Younger buyers, priced out of housing or traditional investments, find smaller speculative markets more approachable. A few figures at £15 each feels achievable, especially when compared with a deposit on a flat. The psychology of affordability makes collectibles attractive as entry-level investments. Still, the volatility is high. Prices can swing dramatically depending on release timing, regional availability, or influencer attention. A character variant may be worth hundreds one month and far less the next. For serious collectors, this makes holding risky. For flippers, it adds excitement, a fast-moving market where fortunes can change overnight. There's a dry comedy in all this. Somewhere financial analysts are building spreadsheets around a toy that looks like a gremlin with toothache. Yet, that's the modern consumer economy. Culture and commerce blurred to the point where a plastic figure can be both a source of joy and a speculative vehicle. Treating Labubu as an asset shows how far the craze extended beyond fandom. It became not only a cultural product, but a financial category. And once toys are treated like investments, the conversation naturally broadens to economics. What Pop Mart's rise says about consumer trends and the business landscape at large. Labubu's rise can't be separated from the wider economic backdrop. In China, where the craze truly took shape, the expansion of the middle class over the past 2 decades has been one of the most significant shifts in global economics. Hundreds of millions of people now have disposable income, and with it, the desire to spend on lifestyle goods rather than just essentials. This consumer growth created a fertile environment for brands like Pop Mart. Collectibles aren't survival purchases, they're discretionary. They thrive when people have money left after housing, food, and transport. As wages rose and younger generations entered stable employment, the appetite for playful, affordable luxuries grew. Labubu was perfectly positioned to capture that demand. Younger consumers in China, especially those born after the 1990s, see consumption differently from their parents. For earlier generations, saving and security dominated financial choices. For younger buyers, self-expression and enjoyment rank higher. Buying a quirky figure that makes you smile isn't viewed as wasteful. It's seen as rewarding yourself for hard work. Urbanization played its role too. With more young people living in dense cities, social activities increasingly revolve around shopping districts, cafes, and lifestyle spaces. Pop Mart's vending machines and flagship stores fit seamlessly into these environments. The shopping trip became more than buying necessities. It became leisure, entertainment, and social identity. The affordability of Labubu added to its success. At around £10 to £15 a piece, figures were priced to be accessible for young professionals while still feeling like a treat. In a consumer economy where property prices and luxury goods feel out of reach, collectibles hit a sweet spot. Premium enough to feel special, but not so expensive they caused guilt. Cultural confidence also factored in. China's rising middle class increasingly values homegrown brands and artistic voices. Labubu wasn't imported from Hollywood. It was born out of a Hong Kong illustrator's imagination and nurtured by a Chinese company. For many fans, that made supporting the brand part of a bigger story about cultural pride. Of course, disposable income is not evenly spread, and the hype wouldn't have worked without strong pockets of urban, educated, and digitally connected consumers. But for the target audience, Labubu represented a new kind of consumption, one that balanced affordability, individuality, and cultural pride. It reflected the bigger trend of China's shift from manufacturing hub to consumer powerhouse. So, the economic story is as important as the design or marketing. Without the rise of the middle class, Labubu would likely have stayed niche. With it, the character became part of a broader wave of spending that reshaped not just toys, but retail as a whole. From here, we can zoom out even further to see what this says about the psychology of fandom itself. Fandom is rarely about the product alone. It's about what the product represents and the connections it builds. Labubu's rise showed how collectibles aren't just plastic on a shelf. They become symbols around which people organize identity, loyalty, and even rituals. Understanding this psychology explains why queues formed, why resale thrived, and why fans defended the brand so passionately. Tribalism is the first driver. Humans like belonging to groups, whether it's football clubs, music genres, or toy characters with spiky hair. Owning a Labubu wasn't just a purchase, it was an entry ticket into a tribe. Fans spotted each other by keychains, hoodies, or shelf displays, instantly recognizing they were part of the same cultural camp. Identity came next. People used Labubu to project taste, humor, or even rebellion. Because the character looked mischievous and slightly odd, it allowed fans to signal that they weren't mainstream. They had quirky, creative leanings. In a way, Labubu became shorthand for personality, like trainers or band merchandise do in other subcultures. Rituals deepened the attachment. Unboxing blind boxes became a ceremony, complete with suspense, disappointment, and triumph. Collectors shared the process online, making it communal. Regular drops created a calendar of events, almost like festivals. The act of queuing, swapping, or refreshing apps at midnight gave fans shared experiences that bound them closer together. Scarcity strengthened these rituals. When not everyone could get a figure, those who did felt a stronger sense of status. Owning a rare version wasn't just about possession, it was proof of dedication. In fandom psychology, scarcity amplifies loyalty because the product feels earned rather than merely bought. Conflict played a role too. Complaints about flippers, debates over designs, and rivalries between casuals and hardcore collectors gave the community an edge. These tensions may sound negative, but they provided energy. Every subculture has its arguments, and far from breaking it apart, they gave Labubu fans more to discuss and more reason to stay engaged. From a business point of view, this fandom behavior is priceless. It turns customers into marketers, rituals into advertising campaigns, and scarcity into free publicity. The emotional investment means fans forgive long queues or missed drops because the frustration is part of the shared experience. Annoying, yes, but bonding at the same time. There's a dry irony here. Adults who roll their eyes at children's playground fads were happily caught up in their own. But that's the secret of fandom. It doesn't disappear when you grow up, it just shifts into new forms. For Labubu, it meant building an audience that wasn't passive, but active, committed, and vocal. And that passion soon attracted the attention of investors. By the time Labubu had cemented itself as a cultural icon, investors were circling. Pop Mart's initial public offering in 2020 on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange was the moment the craze officially crossed from subculture into the financial mainstream. The company raised over $600 million, valuing it at more than £5 billion. For a toy business, those numbers turned heads. The IPO pitch was straightforward. Pop Mart wasn't selling toys, it was selling a system. Blind boxes, character franchises, and collector communities were presented as predictable, repeatable engines of growth. Investors weren't just buying into Labubu, they were buying into the idea that Pop Mart could keep producing the next Labubu, a factory for obsession. Market capitalization surged after listing, at one point valuing the company at around £9 billion. That placed it above established global toy giants with decades of history. For a business younger than many of its customers, this leap raised eyebrows. Enthusiasts saw it as proof of potential. Critics wondered if it looked more like a bubble than a sustainable business. Skepticism centered on 2 points. First, the risk of fatigue. Could blind boxes really stay exciting forever? Second, the risk of over-reliance on a few characters. If Labubu or Molly slipped in popularity, would the whole model wobble? Analysts compared it to fashion brands, where consumer taste can shift rapidly and unpredictably. Still, the fundamentals were stronger than some gave credit for. Margins on collectibles are high, with low production costs relative to retail price. Repeat purchase behavior was baked into the model since collectors rarely stop at one, and the community effect made revenues more predictable than they appeared from the outside. It wasn't just hype, it was habit. Of course, public markets don't move only on business logic. Sentiment matters, and Pop Mart's share price fluctuated as investors debated whether it was a cultural powerhouse or a fad dressed in spreadsheets. At times, the valuation dipped sharply, reminding everyone that even billion-pound toy businesses aren't immune to market moods. For Pop Mart, the IPO was both validation and pressure. Validation that investors recognized the scale of what had been built. Pressure because public companies must deliver quarter after quarter, and cultural phenomena rarely follow neat financial calendars. Labubu might be mischievous, but financial markets are far less forgiving. The investor story highlighted a bigger theme. What began as an art toy sketched by Kasing Lung became a publicly traded enterprise, shaping billions in market value. That leap from shelf to stock exchange shows the reach of modern consumer culture and sets the stage for drawing out the final lessons from Labubu's strange billion-pound journey. By now, Labubu's journey looks less like a fluke and more like a carefully engineered playbook. From an illustrator's sketchbook to a £1.8 billion empire, the story has been about more than toys. It's been about psychology, scarcity, community, and operational discipline. What looked chaotic on the surface was, in reality, a tightly managed business system dressed up as play. The key themes stand out clearly. First, the design, strange enough to be memorable but charming enough to be collectible. Second, the distribution, queues, blind boxes, vending machines, and online platforms working in harmony to maximize reach while protecting scarcity. Third, the community. Fans weren't just buying, they were trading, queuing, and sharing rituals that kept demand alive. We've also seen how resale wasn't a problem to be solved, but a feature to be harnessed. Instead of trying to shut down flippers, Pop Mart let secondary markets act as free advertising and free demand forecasting. Prices rising on resale platforms didn't damage the brand. They strengthened the perception of value, giving fans even more reason to chase the next drop. At the business level, Pop Mart balanced the art of novelty with the science of operations. They kept production efficient, pricing structured, and quality consistent. Every small decision, from packaging details to app notifications, reinforced the system. It was commercial theatre, and the fans bought tickets gladly, sometimes literally by queuing for hours at a shopfront. Of course, none of this happened in a vacuum. The rise of China's middle class, the shift towards self-expression among younger consumers, and the digital tools that allowed communities to form all created the conditions for Labubu to flourish. Without that backdrop, the character might have stayed a niche art toy. Timing, as always, was everything. The comparisons remind us of what could have gone wrong. Beanie Babies taught the danger of oversupply. Funko showed how over-licensing can flatten identity. Molly proved that character-driven blind boxes can scale if managed with discipline. Labubu survived and thrived because Pop Mart learned from each case, borrowing the best ideas while avoiding the worst pitfalls. At the cultural level, Labubu reveals how fandom works. Adults buying toys isn't irrational. It's about identity, belonging, and joy. Collectibles give structure, status, and community in a fragmented world. They're small luxuries that carry big meaning. For some, Labubu was plastic. For others, it was a lifestyle, a network, even a portfolio. So as we begin to wrap up, the picture becomes clear. Labubu's success wasn't built on magic or luck. It was built on a layered strategy that turned art into commerce and commerce into culture. And that leaves us with one final step: to gather the lessons and consider what this mischievous gremlin can teach anyone interested in building lasting value. We began tonight with a simple question: how did a strange little character with rabbit ears and sharp teeth become the centerpiece of a billion-pound company? On the surface, Labubu looks like an accident of internet culture, but we've seen it's anything but. Behind the wide eyes and mischievous grin was a meticulously built business strategy disguised as a toy craze. The journey showed us how design, scarcity, and psychology combine when managed with discipline. Pop Mart didn't just make toys. They engineered a system where every purchase was part of a wider game. Collectors weren't buying blind boxes at random. They were participating in a carefully designed ritual that blended chance, status, and belonging. We also uncovered how timing and culture shaped the outcome. Without China's rising middle class, digital communities, and the global appetite for affordable self-expression, Labubu might have stayed a niche doodle. Instead, those forces collided to make it the perfect mascot for a generation searching for something small, fun, and strangely meaningful. At each step, Pop Mart avoided the classic traps of the collectible market. They didn't flood supply, they didn't dilute identity with endless licensing, and they didn't chase hype at the expense of longevity. Instead, they managed growth with restraint, letting demand stay one step ahead of supply. The golden rule of keeping people queuing. The comparisons helped us see why Labubu endured where others faltered. Beanie Babies collapsed under speculation. Funko struggled with oversaturation. Molly proved that characters could scale, but Labubu proved it could be done globally, with broader cultural resonance. Each story was a lesson Pop Mart quietly absorbed and put into practice. Culturally, Labubu revealed something bigger about people. These weren't just toys, they were social tokens. To some, they were financial assets. To others, emotional anchors. The plastic figure was secondary. The meaning sat in the chase, the community, and the sense of having something others wanted. As strange as it looks, that's entirely human. So when we ask why Labubu became such a phenomenon, the answer lies in layers. Smart business strategy, cultural timing, emotional resonance, and perhaps just a touch of luck. It wasn't one big moment, but a series of careful moves that built momentum until it felt unstoppable. And that brings our journey to a gentle close. If you're still with us, you're welcome to drift off with another of our sleepy deep dives. Until then, rest well and good night.